I'm 76 years old, and I've come to understand that most of the damage I caused in my life was done with my silence. Not anger, not cruelty, not neglect in the way people usually describe it. Just silence. At moments when someone needed me to speak and I chose not to. At this age, the house is quieter than I ever imagined it would be. The clock in the hallway sounds louder now. I hear it at night when I wake up and cannot return to sleep. It reminds me of how steady time has always been, even when I pretended it was waiting for me to catch up. I am not telling this because I expect forgiveness. Most of the people connected to these memories are either gone or too far away from me now. I speak because I know there are people younger than me who still believe there will be another chance to say the right thing later. I believed that too. When I was a young man, I thought silence meant strength. My father was a quiet man. He worked at a railway workshop and came home tired every evening. He rarely argued, rarely explained himself, rarely apologized. He carried himself like his words were expensive, and I admired that. I grew up thinking restraint was dignity. By the time I was in my 20s, I had already learned to swallow disagreement, swallow affection, swallow worry. It made life seem smoother, less conflict, less mess. I told myself I was being practical. I married when I was 27. My wife, Samina, was different from me in ways I did not fully appreciate at the time. She spoke easily about feelings. She asked questions I did not know how to answer. She laughed loudly and she cried openly. I found it overwhelming, but also comforting in a way I never admitted. In our early years, we were happy in ordinary ways. We rented a small apartment above a grocery shop. The smell of spices and onions drifted up through the floorboards. The ceiling fan made a clicking sound that I never fixed, though I promised to many times. Samina would sit on the floor folding laundry while talking about her day. I would sit on the sofa reading the newspaper or pretending to read it. I listened, but I did not participate much. She would sometimes pause and ask, "What do you think?" I would say, "It's fine. You handled it well." I thought that was support. Looking back, I realized she was not asking for approval. She was asking for connection. I did not understand the difference. When our first child was born, a daughter, I felt something shift inside me. I was terrified. Responsibility sat on my chest like a heavy stone. I believed my job was to provide stability, and I focused on that with complete seriousness. I worked long hours. I accepted overtime whenever it was offered. I said yes to extra assignments because I believed security came from sacrifice. When I came home, I was exhausted, but I convinced myself that exhaustion was proof of love. Samina would sometimes wait for me to eat dinner together. I often told her to go ahead without me. She would nod and smile, but I remember once noticing her plate still untouched when I finally sat down. I noticed it. I said nothing. That became a pattern in my life. I noticed many things. I spoke about very few of them. Our daughter grew into a thoughtful, sensitive child. She liked drawing and would bring me her pictures. I would look at them and say, "Very nice," without lifting my eyes fully from whatever I was doing. I thought encouragement did not need detail. Years later, I found a box of her childhood drawings. Most of them had dates and small notes she had written herself. On one of them she wrote, "Maybe Baba will like this one more." I kept that paper. I still have it. When she was 13, she began to change. She became quieter around me. I assumed it was normal teenage behavior. Samina once told me, late at night, that our daughter seemed afraid to talk to me about her problems. I laughed softly and said, "Afraid? I've never raised my voice at her." Samina looked at me in a way I did not understand then. She said, "Silence can also be loud." I remember feeling slightly irritated. I told her she worried too much. The conversation ended there. I went to sleep easily that night. There were many moments like that, small crossroads where a few honest words might have changed the direction of something important. I passed those crossroads quietly, convincing myself I was keeping peace. When my son was born a few years later, I repeated the same habits. I attended his school events when my schedule allowed, which was not often. I paid his tuition on time. I made sure he had what he needed materially. He once asked me to come watch him play cricket in a school tournament. I promised I would try. That day, my supervisor asked if I could stay late to help close an inventory issue. It did not feel like a big decision. I stayed. That evening, my son did not mention the match. I did not ask about it. The next day, I heard from Samina that he had been chosen as captain for that game and kept looking toward the gate while playing. I remember nodding and saying, "That's good. I'm glad he did well." I never told him I was sorry for missing it. Time moved forward the way it always does, without announcing how much it is taking with it. The children grew older. Samina became quieter over the years. Not unhappy exactly, just quieter in a way that should have concerned me more than it did. She stopped asking me what I thought about things. She made decisions on her own. I told myself that meant she trusted her own judgment. I thought it was healthy independence. In my mid-40s, my work reached its peak. I was respected. I supervised people. I received awards that sat in a cabinet in our living room. Visitors would comment on them, and I would smile modestly. Samina never mentioned them. At the time, I believed she simply was not interested in such things. Now I wonder if she was measuring value differently and had already stopped expecting me to understand. The first real crack appeared when our daughter left for university in another city. The night before she left, she came into the living room where I was watching television. She stood near the doorway for a long moment. She said, "Baba, do you think I'll manage on my own?" I remember lowering the volume and saying, "Of course, you're responsible." She nodded. She waited there a few seconds longer. I felt there was something else she wanted, but I could not identify it. The silence stretched, and I felt uncomfortable, so I raised the volume again. She left the next morning. Years later, she told her mother that she had hoped I would tell her I would miss her. I did miss her. I just never said it. The irreversible moment in my life did not come with shouting or dramatic scenes. It arrived quietly, like most of my regrets. Samina fell ill when we were both in our late 50s. At first it seemed like fatigue, then tests, then more tests. Eventually the doctor spoke words that made the room feel smaller. Cancer, advanced stage. During her treatment she remained calm in a way that frightened me. She still asked me about my day. She still reminded me to eat properly. I sat beside her hospital bed many nights, holding newspapers I never read. There was one evening I think about more than any other. She was weaker that day. The hospital window was open slightly, and I remember the curtain moving with the wind. She said, "You've always been a good provider." I nodded. I did not know what else to do with my hands, so I adjusted her blanket. Then she said very gently, "I sometimes wished you would talk to me more, not about work, about you." I felt something rising in my chest, something unfamiliar and sharp. I wanted to say so many things at once, that I was scared of failing her, that I loved her more than I ever said, that I did not know how to speak about feelings because no one had ever taught me. Instead, I said, "You should rest, don't think too much." She gave a small smile, not hurt, not angry, just tired. She died 3 weeks later. After her funeral, people filled the house for days. Then they left one by one. The rooms felt different without her voice moving through them. I sat in our bedroom and noticed how many conversations we had never finished or never started. That was when clarity came, not in a sudden revelation, but like a slow light filling a dark room. I began remembering all the pauses where words should have existed, the dinners eaten quietly, the celebrations where I stood slightly apart, the apologies I rehearsed in my head but never spoke out loud. What is permanently lost is not just Samina herself. It is the version of our marriage that might have existed if I had allowed myself to be known. It is the father my children might have felt closer to. It is the chance to ask questions whose answers I will never hear. You cannot go back and tell someone you love them in the exact moment they needed to hear it. Saying it later does not carry the same warmth. It becomes a statement floating in empty air. My children visit when they can. They are respectful, kind, careful with me. There is no open conflict between us. In some ways, that makes it harder. Conversations stay on safe ground. Health, weather, their work, their children. I sense they learned from me how to keep certain doors closed. I see it in the way they pause before speaking about anything emotional. I recognize that hesitation because it is mine. Sometimes my daughter hugs me before leaving, and she holds on a second longer than expected. I wonder if she is waiting for something from me even now. I usually pat her shoulder and tell her to drive safely. I am still learning how to speak, but time is a poor teacher when lessons arrive this late. If you are listening to me and you are younger, I am not here to instruct you. I have no authority to tell anyone how to live. I only know what absence feels like when it is built slowly, brick by brick, through unsaid words. There is a particular loneliness that comes from being physically present in many lives, but emotionally distant in them. People remember you as dependable, responsible, calm, but they do not remember what it felt like to truly know you. I spent decades believing conflict was the greatest danger to relationships. I never considered that distance could be more permanent than conflict. I used to believe love could be understood without being spoken. Sometimes it can, often it cannot. Now my mornings are slow. I make tea for one. I sit near the window where Samina once kept her plants. I have tried to keep them alive, but I am not very good at it. Some grow, some fade. I suppose that is not unusual. I talk out loud sometimes when no one is here. I tell her things about my day, small and meaningless things. I apologize to the air. It is a strange habit, but it is the closest thing I have to conversation with her now. If there is anything I wish I had known, it is how ordinary moments are the only places where relationships are truly built, not in grand gestures, not in achievements. In the simple decision to answer honestly when someone asks, "What do you think?" or "How do you feel?" or "Will you miss me?" Those questions are invitations. I treated them like formalities. I do not know how much time I have left. At 76, the body begins to remind you that it has its own schedule. I walk more slowly. I forget names sometimes. I find myself searching for glasses that are already in my hand. None of that frightens me as much as the knowledge that my story is mostly finished and large parts of it were lived behind a closed mouth. If you ever sit with someone you care about and feel words forming but not leaving your lips, you might recognize the moment I am describing. I recognized it too many times. I simply let it pass. Silence feels safe when you are young. It feels very different when you are old and sitting in a quiet house where the person who once waited for your voice is no longer there. I am not looking for redemption. I am only telling the truth as I finally see it. The clock in my hallway is still ticking. It has never slowed down for my hesitation. It will not slow down now.